It is genuinely difficult to assimilate, to take in the sheer scale of it all at dawn this morning. Landscape to ashscape, where the affluent idyll of Pacific Palisades used to be. But it all begins last night.
Multiple wildfires raging out of control tonight, fueled by hurricane-force winds. The fire in the Pacific Palisades, now the most destructive in the city's history.
The power has been cut off, but the night is still bright on the drought-stricken, tinder-dry hills around Los Angeles. The people have gone. Mandatory evacuation.
It's like Armageddon. When you can see the flames coming up over the houses and you're just getting out of the driveway and the smoke and the ash is so thick, I'm surprised all of us got out of there without burning up ourselves.
The luxurious coastal housing of Pacific Palisades burned through the night.
We have a line of fire along the Santa Monica Mountains.
Dan, you've seen a few fires. Ever seen anything on this scale in LA?
This is the worst one for me. Worst one I've ever seen.
No question.
No question.
The mailbox survives beyond the address it served. A random child's toy abandoned, apparently in the rush to leave. And along the street, what seemed to be an attempt to stash household goods into a car, anywhere to escape the flames, and then abandoned. An army of fire crews has been here for 3 days and nights now. The prime objective is to save lives first, get the people out. Their properties come very much second.
We want to make sure that everyone gets out of harm's way, and that has been our top priority. So far, we have been successful in that. Then we can begin taking care of property and houses.
Over 1,000 buildings destroyed in this small coastal community alone.
Much of this street's already been destroyed by the fire or is being destroyed right now. But what's happening here is that the fire crews are trying to protect an undamaged building next door. It's quite arbitrary. Some houses are untouched. Across the other side of the street here, this house has already gone. The house next door, untouched. And they may do the same to try and save that property. But it's far and few the number of properties and houses where they've got the resources and the people to do that.
For some days, nature has had the upper hand here. Europe has her Mistral and Sirocco seasonal winds. Los Angeles, the Santa Ana. Flames spreading with gales gusting close to hurricane force in recent days, leaving a cruelly arbitrary, random pattern of destruction as the wind changes direction constantly. One family home completely intact, next door an inferno.
People expect a fire to just come like a wall through a town and destroy everything in its path. This isn't like this. It's quite arbitrary, you know?
It's quite a bit more chaotic. It's extremely difficult to predict. It's extremely difficult to contain. The fact is that we're always one step behind these extreme weather events.
Sunrise in this charred place where Pacific Palisades used to be. The irony of fire disaster. Chimneys and fireplaces about the only structures left standing. And it is block after block after block. In a place where 30,000 once lived the cliche of Southern Californian beach affluent. Ground level, the sound of running water in a drought-parched landscape is from burst pipes.
That's pretty much like a hurricane, except instead of rain, we had fire.
Ever experienced anything like that?
Not to this magnitude, and I think this would be, a lot would say that this would probably be the biggest and worst brush fire we've had in LA.
Dave Walters fought flames here for 3 days, but in the end could save only one house in this entire street. And what's becoming a familiar lament here from firefighters, the water in the hydrants just wasn't sufficient.
The only reason why we were able to save the only home on this street was because they had a pool, and we took that water pretty instantly.
The Corpus Christi Church burned out to its skeleton frame.
Leave the politicians to one side. Here in California, on one thing, meteorologists, academics, police and fire department are unanimous. It is the climate crisis which has made this disaster so much worse. Specifically, the droughts, the high summer temperatures, and the failure of the autumn rains in November. That meant that when the winter winds, the Santa Ana winds came, they should have been blowing over damp ground. They were blowing over absolutely parched terrain, and this is the result.
Mercifully, the Santa Ana winds will moderate today, and that gives firefighters a chance, a window, with reinforcements coming in statewide and from Oregon and Arizona. But then the winds will strengthen. Some smaller fires are now under control, but in tinder dry drought terrain, the potential for new ignition anywhere, anytime is real, until the rains finally come to this place.
Alex Thompson on the scene in Palisades. Well, a little before we came on air, I spoke to Malibu resident John Turteltaub. He's also a film director, and his credits include Cool Runnings, National Treasure, and The Meg. We reached him on a video call from outside his house, where almost all the surrounding houses had already burnt down. I asked him what was exactly happening at the time.
Well, right now, basically, I'm on Malibu Beach. I'm going to show you, if I can, the street where I live. These are basically the only 4 houses that have not burned on Malibu Beach, and that's not an exaggeration. Here's the most LA thing I can say, but every house in Malibu from here to Nobu is burned.
Nobu, the restaurant?
Yes, they managed, in Malibu style, we managed to save Nobu.
And what about your house? Is your house still standing, or has that been reduced to ashes?
The house is still standing, thanks to neighbors working literally 36 straight hours, and we're not out of the woods yet. All these houses, as you can see, the fire department's here. There's constantly little flare-ups and smolders, and embers come and reignite the fire. I know it's loud here, but I'm going to try to show you, like...
Okay, I can see that destruction, yes. And the destruction that you've just shown us, John, how quick was that? How many hours or days did that take?
Oh, the houses came down very quickly. Probably in a matter of 3-4 hours, 100 houses were gone.
What's it going to be like, John, living in that neighborhood, assuming that your house survives the flames, when all the other houses have just gone?
If the house makes it, I'm not even sure there is a neighborhood to live in. We'll be on a little street with 4 houses, and it'll be the only 4 houses for miles and miles. And I don't know that we will stay, even if we do save the house.
John, you're in the movie business. You're a storyteller. You're living amongst storytellers and, you know, in the factory of people's dreams and nightmares in Hollywood. I mean, what does this do to you as someone who tells stories when the reality is so much more stark and miserable than perhaps most things you could have imagined?
I have to tell you, this fire is worse than anything anyone thought would happen, anything we dreamed up. I don't think the country, the state, the world realizes whatever you're seeing, it's much worse. I don't know. I mean, LA will recover, but this is going to take a huge amount of work and time and money like no one can believe to offset what's happened.
Tell us about, well, what are we looking at right now? Who used to live there?
Okay, right here, this is several homes gone. The people who live in these houses tend to live here for years and years and years. And it's funny, everyone has heard of Malibu Beach and the fabulous beach houses on Malibu Beach. It's some of the most expensive real estate in the world. There is none anymore. It is 100% gone.
John, we're going to have a president in the 10 days' time who is famous for being a climate change skeptic, possibly even denier. What message does this fire, this catastrophe, send to him?
First of all, you said, we're going to have a president. No, you're not. We're going to have a president. You're going to be fine. here's the significance of the president coming in. People are afraid to say nasty things because he has said, if you're nasty, we're not going to send you help. That's crazy. That's what has happened here. So is climate change the reason? I don't know. Probably, but I don't know. I can sort of sense that there's a little sense of, oh, a bunch of rich people lost their houses. Yes. I don't know if they're rich anymore, but this is an icon of Los Angeles and California, and not here, Pacific Palisades, and it's still moving. It's still going. People need help.
John, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm joined now by John Valiant, journalist and author of the Bailey Gifford Prize-winning non-fiction work, Fire Weather, an account of the 2016 inferno that engulfed the oil town of Fort McMurray in Canada, and an examination of our future in a more flammable world. He joins me now from Orange County, which is just south of Los Angeles. John, thanks for coming on the programme. I mean, I'm sure you heard the accounts just now, these very personal and searing accounts of absolute shock when you see your own home for many years burnt down by the flames. But at the same time, this stuff, to a different degree, happens every year, doesn't it?
Matt, it's what's shocking to me and what is really painful to see and hear is the incredulity and surprise of these people, the firefighters and the survivors alike. And they describe something as if it was the first time it happened. And it's true, it's the first time it happened to them. But the same thing happened to thousands of people in Valparaiso, Chile this spring. It happened to thousands of people in Lahaina, Hawaii, a couple of years ago, in Paradise, California, just up the highway from Los Angeles. It happened in Fort McMurray, Alberta, in the subarctic of Canada in 2016. And damage as bad as this, fires moving as quickly as this. This is unfortunately not new. It's just new to them.
And for those of us who've been lucky enough not to have had this experience ever in our lives, and you have had it, describe what it's like, the whims of these flames.
It's really like being in a blast furnace. You know, the Santa, you know, each region is different climatically, but global warming has supercharged the atmosphere and heated the landscape to the point that fire can move across it with an unprecedented ferocity and speed. And that is the indicator, you know, the marker of what I call 21st century fire. It's the speed of the flames. And we saw that in shocking technicolor, if you will, over the past couple of days in Los Angeles County. But the same thing happened in Paradise, California, in Lahaina, Hawaii, in Fort McMurray, you know, I could go on.
The list is long and sadly gets longer every year. Now, of course, the political blame game is inevitable. You know, many people are pointing fingers at Donald Trump, who's about to move into the White House, saying, you know, he is a climate change denier or skeptic and worse will happen under him. And he's pointed the finger right back at California and the governor, Gavin Newsom, saying, you guys weren't prepared for this kind of fire. Who's right?
The cynicism of weaponizing and politicizing a global problem is, you know, frankly, criminal. Enormous harm is going to be done by this, enormous damage. It will divide the country even further. And it is also, frankly, he's not the president yet, but it is unpresidential to speak in this way when a nation that is the fifth largest economy in the world, namely California, is in crisis. People have been killed, and it's a nation-dividing rhetoric, and there's no benefit to it. Even the parties, even the winning parties, you know, will not benefit from it in the end, because this is a global
We're looking at
problem.
pictures now of Los Angeles, you know, in a terrible state. I mean, is there anything that the state authorities in California could have done, should have done, that they didn't do to prevent this?
So there is, where all of us are living in a kind of a certain amount of psychological fantasy. And that is the status quo of our normal lives. And despite the fact that California is a famously flammable state, the residents of Los Angeles County who live in steep, flammable hillsides imagine that they might somehow magically be impervious to this. It's a fire-prone landscape. The LAPD is massive and experienced. The water system and the hydrant system are actually excellent. But when you're driving that much water uphill with pumps, that's when you start to lose pressure. That happened in Fort McMurray too. That's another wealthy city with good infrastructure. You cannot blame it just on the infrastructure.
But finally, John, is your message, to our viewers, and to people who read your books, that actually this is the new normal? This should not be seen as a kind of searing exception. This is the new normal.
As long as governments and the financiers and banks who enable them stay loyal to the petroleum industry, this is going to be repeating itself over and over again in more and more extreme forms. And the message here is an international one, and that is to decarbonize. And that can be a peaceful mission, and it can be a uniting mission. And that's the message from nature to all of us.
Well, let's see if it's received by the people who matter. John Valiant, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Matt. Good to be with you.
Now, with Los Angeles still under a red flag alert and new fires having to be dealt with, the impact on the ability of local people to insure their homes is also under the spotlight. Experts have warned that the costs of the claims from the fires in the past couple of days could push the California insurance industry to the brink of collapse. And the crisis isn't over yet. Here's Kemi Nzerim.
So much for the Golden State. From the Pacific Coast Highway to Malibu, wildfires continue to ravage America's wealthiest state. Inland, Pasadena, near the Eaton fire, is the same.
We have 0% containment. We have over 879 firefighting personnel assigned.
Wildfires fanned by climate breakdown, which is making large parts of some of America's most desirable zip codes uninsurable. Some of the country's largest commercial insurance providers are pulling out of fire zones like Palisades. California's insurer of last resort is called FAIR, which is now the only option for thousands of homeowners and businesses. FAIR says it has nearly $37 billion of exposure across Southern California alone. Industry analysts fear losses from these fires will be between $6 and $13 billion. But last summer, FAIR acknowledged they only have about $385 million in reserves to pay for claims. To cover that huge gap, the cost of insurance for everyone will inevitably go up. And it's not just wildfires. Insured losses from natural disasters across the USA are skyrocketing. 2009 to 2016, losses generally stayed well under $60 billion a year. But 2017 to 23, it's only dropped below $60 billion once. 2025, what used to be some of LA's most expensive homes. What a start to the year.
But what happened there, I don't think there's anything that I've ever seen quite like it. And the insurance companies are going to have a big problem because you're talking about big, big dollars.
But could it become Trump's problem? Motto, drill, baby, drill. A California Senate Budget Committee report published only last month was titled, "The Climate-Driven Insurance Crisis is Here and Getting Worse." Remember the financial crisis of 2008? The report warns it could happen again, urging huge reductions in carbon pollution. The impact of climate breakdown is increasingly being felt by the wealthy as well as the poor, from hurricane-prone Palm Beach in the east, which happens to be MAGA central, to liberal California on the west.
We woke up in the morning and our house, which is near the beach, just smelled of smoke.
Geopolitics analyst Sean West had to evacuate his Santa Monica home.
Do you think the fires in California might have any impact on the president's
energy and, more importantly, climate change policies?
I think the president's energy and climate change policies are pretty well fixed, and he campaigned on being very pro-drilling, very pro-fossil fuels, very ESG. I don't think this environmental catastrophe, any more than the hurricanes that we experience and things like that, even if the frequency of these events we can acknowledge it's happening more frequently, I think the political views on it are fixed.
Meanwhile, fires and hurricanes mean more and more wealthy Americans, not just in California, but in Republican Texas and Florida too, are finding their premiums spiral out of reach. People with influence, people who vote.